If Ben Simmons is healthy and plays well, is there a future where he re-signs with the Nets to keep him in Brooklyn past this season?
Yes. My gut feeling tells me that yes, there is a future where that is possible. Just because I think that
Gets it off in time. And he's going, baby! Big time Nets win!
The only Net fans you know? The only Nets fans you know?
Man.
I mean, come on, man. Or are these guys?
Welcome back to Only Net Fans You Know podcast. I'm Peter. Welcome to episode number 92. I have a very special guest today. Our guest today is a credentialed member of the media covering the Nets for Sports Illustrated. He also runs a YouTube channel and Substack called Floor and Ceiling that focuses on NBA draft prospects. Welcome to the show, Wilko Martinez-Cachero. What's up?
appreciate you having me on, man. Everything's good. Just watch the Nets. I think the season's gotten off to a pretty good start, though, all things considered, and excited to chop it up with you.
Yeah, Nets are at 5-7 right now. They beat New Orleans, a couple competitive losses against the Celtics and Cavs. You're obviously, like I mentioned before, you're credentialed. You have a little bit more of an insight than most fans do. What do you think is the main difference between last year's team and this year's team as far as energy? Is it the roster? Is it the coaching? Like, what is it?
For me, it's like two different things, and I think the biggest one is definitely the coaching. Based on what players say, based on how they behave, based on what we're seeing, on the court, everyone seems to be on board with what Jordy is trying to do in Brooklyn. Just being more positive, being more vocal, even, and just a little bit more proactive as well with his decisions. I think has really helped this group of players. Even more so than that, kind of going into the season, I know that a lot of people sort of had their doubts about Brooklyn having some of these, vets like Dennis Schroeder and Dorian Finney-Smith, like even Cam Johnson. But I think that having all those guys around and kind of meshing them with all the youth that the team has been very helpful. Dennis Schroeder in particular, he's a pretty positive voice in the locker room always. Cam Johnson, just a mature, steady head on his shoulders. So kind of putting those bets together with Jordy and just sort of having this, fresh air around the group and around the organization now that everyone is sort of aware that the group is starting over. I think it's really helped just having that, sort of fresh, do-over with a new coach, with some new pieces as well, and some new objectives.
For a scheme that Jordy uses, he uses the point series. The offense is run through the elbow, preferably with a big man like Ben or Clax. You need certain guys in certain positions to play their role for the offense to work. If you could pick three guys that are the most essential to running the offense, who do you think, who would those three guys be?
In theory, or idealistically, if you will, like Nic Claxton should be the most important guy. From now on, Clax is going to be the starter. That's a surefire thing. So that doesn't really concern me. What I will say, though, I want to see him be more aggressive. When he's getting those touches at the elbow, sure, he should be facilitating and he should be, looking to hand the ball off. But I want to see Claxton be aggressive, like he can score the ball. That's never going to be his, forte. Maybe he's going to be a defensive player more than anything, but he can score the ball on offense. He can do things on that end of the floor. And I think that as the season progresses, we're going to see him be a little bit less shy. We're going to see him be more empowered to make decisions with the ball in his hands. But eventually, I do think we'll get to the point where he becomes the most crucial player. Then number two, I'm going to go with Zaire Williams, because with Zaire, I think that my pitch on him right now is that for the most part, he's going to be guarding the other team's best wing, right? So that already makes him pretty valuable, and it means, I should say, that he's going to play a lot of minutes with the Nets for the most part. And then to close things off, I'm going to have to go with Noah Clowney. Now, I think that Clowney's role for this season is not guaranteed at all, right? Like, Daron Sharp and Trendon Watford, they still have to come back. And I think that Jordy Fernandez in particular should really like Trendon Watford. He can facilitate, he can play make, he's smart with the ball in his hands, he can make decisions. And then on defense, he's not the most active guy on defense in terms of getting steals and blocks, but he's big, he knows how to move, he's okay. And it's not like Clowney is great on D, but so far throughout this, first stretch of games for Fernandez, I think that Noah has been really important because he unlocks in many ways different lineups with Nic Claxton and Ben Simmons. So even if Noah might not be that consistent on the court, he checks in and he plays for 3 minutes and he has 3 fouls in 3 minutes. That can be frustrating. But at the same time, having him on the roster allows you to, play with 2 bigs at once, allows you to play with Ben Simmons and another big. And so those 3 guys, Clax, Zaire, and Noah Clowney, through this first early season stretch, I would say they're my 3 swing guys for the Nets.
All right. I'm going to give you some pushback on this. This is your opinion. So obviously you're allowed to, you're allowed to have your opinion. My question would be, how is Noah Clowney one of those key guys if he's only playing like 15 minutes a game? I understand the spacing is, we don't have to talk about it. That's a very big point. Maybe one of the bigger points in general for your view on things. But he's only getting like 15 minutes a game. The minutes are the issue for me. The minutes are definitely the issue for me.
I hear you out. I think that for me, just like the biggest differentiator for Noah is that, all right, let's take Keon Johnson, right? Or even, someone like Dennis Schroeder, maybe, if we're talking about a guy who's getting even more minutes and like more of a focal role on the team. Yeah. I think that what kind of sets Noah apart from a Dennis or a Keon is that I could look around, even around the roster, right? And like I can see Cam Thomas sort of filling into Schroeder's shoes as the season goes on. With Keon Johnson, like, sure, he's been pretty impressive in the minutes that he's gotten. But at the same time, if 5 or 6 games ago, it's Tyrese Martin who instead gets that run, I could see him coming up with some of those same, plays where Keon is being pesky on the ball on defense, and then he's moving off the ball on offense. But even though Keon has been good, he's been good relative to his standards, I would say. He hasn't been, incredible in terms of just a backup unit level guard option. So that's where I would push back and say that Clowney, for me, has been a little bit more important just because he allows the Nets to tap into different lineups that otherwise they might not be able to access.
I think that was a great answer. You put me in my place. You just put out an article talking about Ben Simmons and Nic Claxton and their minutes playing together, elephant in the room. Can they play together? I don't think they can long term. I think they play the same position on offense. I just think they're a little redundant.
Nah, if I'm being brutally honest, yeah, I'm with you. I think you kind of nailed it. Both guys play the same role or function in this offensive system. So it's sure, you can work around it. And I wrote about it in the article, right? I think Jordy Fernandez did a solid job at making sure that there were moving pieces and, cutters and stuff when Clax and Ben were on the floor together against the Pelicans. So, I think they played 7 minutes together in that game, and it was pretty solid. It was better than I think anyone expected. But in the long run and just thinking big picture, I think that what we will continue to see, probably at least, is kind of what we saw versus New Orleans, which is that in certain games, Claxton and Simmons will be on the court together for, 5 to 7 minutes, something like that. 3 to 5 minutes, just pretty short stretches of time, because like you were saying, their skill sets, there's too much overlap. You're not gonna have 2 non-shooters, and especially if you then have, let's say, Keon Johnson as well on the floor, which is what happened against the Pelicans, then you're potentially up to 3 non-shooters, or at least 3 guys who are non-shooting threats. So it's just too much, like in 2024 and 2025 NBA, you can't operate like that. So eventually something is going to have to give, but the Nets are in a situation where they don't really have to force their hand here.
If Ben Simmons is healthy and plays well, is there a future where he re-signs with the Nets on a much lower contract to keep him in Brooklyn past this season?
Yes, my gut feeling tells me that yes, there is a future where that is possible. Just because I think that Ben Simmons and his camp have been pretty happy with the way that the Brooklyn Nets have treated him. His season-ending back injuries two years in a row now. So yeah, I do think that there is a possibility. Now, do I think that it's likely? No, I don't think so. I think that Ben and Bernie Lee, his agent, they will prioritize whatever destination offers him the most money and the most important role. But I do think that there is a future in which Brooklyn could be the most appealing organization for Ben Simmons.
Okay, so obviously this little run that the Nets are on, small sample size. Vegas picked going into the season. Vegas picked us to have an over/under of 18.5 wins. They're already at 5. Looks like a very good chance they're going to at least get to 20, if not more, possibly, right? I think the NBA is surprised. The fans are surprised. We have a couple of vets that need to be traded. Dorian Finney-Smith, his value has gone up. CJ's value has gone up. Schroeder's value has gone up. If the Nets are playing this well towards the trade deadline, let's say they're sort of at the play-in game stage, what do you think happens? Do you continue with the script and trade the guys? It's kind of a slap in the face to the roster because you guys work so hard. We get to the trade deadline, and now we're trading away some crucial pieces. Or do you continue the script because basically, let's face it, the long-term view is trying to get a top 5 pick in this draft, right? So, well, what do you think happens with that?
Look, I mean, the good news here, I think, is that based on everything that I know and based on everything that has been said in public, is that the Nets front office, including GM Sean Marks, has been very upfront with players, right? Especially those vets about their futures and about letting them know that, hey, if the right deal comes along, if the right trade is offered to us, there is a chance that you'll be moved. Now, what you're saying, I think, is where it gets dicey, right? Like, let's say that you are around that trade deadline, kind of time of the year, and the Nets are still doing pretty well, or they're doing, quote unquote, better than they should be for their draft aspirations. Just looking at it cold heartedly, even though this is an easy group to get behind and cheer for, I think that the Nets just have to be analytical here. They have to move the veteran pieces if that is what's making them good and competitive, and they have to do it, as soon as possible. And I think that in the cases of Dennis Schroeder and Cam Johnson, as well as Dorian Finney-Smith, there is a definite market out there for them. With Cam Johnson, I think that the team that keeps popping up is the LA Lakers, but just kind of thinking about it, the destination makes a lot of sense, but it's like, what are the Lakers going to give the Nets, right? Or what is a team going to give the Nets for Dennis Schroeder? Because Dennis Schroeder is a guy who can come in and elevate your backup unit in a playoff setting, for example. So Brooklyn has a lot of valuable pieces, and I think that once those dates get closer, unfortunately, if the team is winning too much, then you have to move them. You have to prioritize getting, a high draft pick. I think that the Nets have to do everything in their willpower to ensure that they get one of those top picks.
I thought it would be very difficult to trade Cam Johnson, not because of per se value or whatever, but that contract. That contract is horrendous. I've been waving the flag saying this new CBA is way too team friendly. And are you going to make a deal for a Cam Johnson that's going to set you, into the apron or the second apron or get you hard capped. Looking at a deal with the Lakers, it's not even almost certainly you're going to need a third team to get involved to get Cam Johnson to the Lakers. There's no easy way to move this around. For that case, I think the Nets will actually keep Cam Johnson. Dennis Schroeder, I thought, was someone that they'd keep just as far as they don't have a point guard. And I thought he'd be a great guy to keep around because he is a vocal leader. He is good in the locker room, like you mentioned. And if you wind up drafting one of those point guards in this year's draft, he's a good veteran to have, show the rookie the way. I'm going to just go on the assumption that Dorian Finney-Smith will be healthy at the time of the trade deadline. Obviously, you're not Sean Marks. What do you think his value could be for a Dorian Finney-Smith or a Dennis Schroeder? What do you think the value around them is right now, possibly?
Man, it's hard to say just because, like, with some of these deals recently, we're seeing all of these picks, fly left and right. So it's kind of hard to, I think, get a gauge on what the trade market truly looks like in today's NBA. What I will say, and I'll say this about Dennis Schroeder, just because with Finney-Smith, there is that player option that he can pick up after the season, so that could complicate things a little bit. But with Dennis Schroeder, he's on an expiring contract. He's a proven asset. Teams will kind of know what they're getting with him. And I think that if you're the Nets, if you're looking to move him around, that playoff time of the year, looking towards the playoffs, you should be, looking to get back at least some draft compensation, or alternatively, a young asset of some sort. So for Dennis Schroeder, I would be looking to, at the very least, have the option to get a player in return who I think can add something, as soon as the following season, even if that is a rookie. But, just kind of thinking back to Sean Marks before the season started, one of the things that he said, which I've sort of kept in my mind after that, is that him, along with 29 other front offices, are still kind of trying to figure out how this new CBA truly works, in real time, in action. And, we're still so early on after having adopted this new CBA. So it's going to be interesting to see how it truly kind of plays out with roster construction, even with lineup construction, once those draft picks are made.
I'm going to switch gears right now. You're running a Substack and YouTube channel called Floor and Ceiling. You focusing on the NBA draft. I'm just going to ask you about a couple players. We're not going to go through 20 guys, but just a couple of the main guys and a couple guys I personally have questions on. One thing to start with that I saw that you did, you had Boogie Fland at 11. And I've heard this guy's the real deal, and he's going to be a big riser in the draft this year. He's a New York guy, and I'm just interested to see how you kind of got to that rating to 11, because a lot of other, networks, a lot of other people, insiders, whatever you want to call them, have him rated either in the 20s or 30s. 11 seems very high, but I'm interested to see how you got there.
Player comp, I'll start with that. I think probably like Darius Garland comes to mind, something like that. Maybe like a little bit of a blend between a Darius Garland and Tyrese Maxey. With Boogie, I mean, I think that my pitch on him is actually pretty straightforward. He's a crafty kind of electric guard at around 6'2" or so, 3-level flashes of scoring, definitely pretty comfortable chaining dribble moves together into his pull-up. But at the same time, he is comfortable enough to kind of scale off the ball, can take those catch and shoots, can cut a little bit. So, you can see him playing next to another point guard even. Or I think, a better fit is next to these bigger ball handling wings that we see in the NBA nowadays. So on offense, there's that. And then defensively, Boogie Fland is small or, at least smaller than some of the bigger guards that we see in the league nowadays. But he plays with a good motor. He's long. He's rangy. I think we've already seen in his limited college minutes so far that he can get steals, that he knows how to jump the passing lanes, anticipate moments. So I'm pretty high on Boogie. I think that right now I have him at 11. A lot of the consensus is still behind on that, but I do think that by the time March rolls around, Boogie Flan will be a lot higher on many big boards.
Igor Demin, the guy from BYU, I see him all of a sudden just shooting up boards to everybody's like top 5, top 10. Why? Well, why the rise so quickly and out of nowhere? And same thing, pros, cons, player comp.
I'll start with the player comp here again, and I'll say that it's Josh Giddey, but with a better shooting profile right now. So that's pretty enticing. Yegor Demin, Russian point guard playing for BYU, came out of Real Madrid, and now he's in college here in the States. But, 6'8" guard, can really pass and play in the pick and roll. I think that the biggest questions about him to date are about his three-point shooting, just because I think that a lot of people watched him when he had some off nights as a shooter. But really, I've been watching Yegor for a long time, and his shot in league play was always pretty consistent and pretty solid. He's a very willing three-point shooter as well. Crafty in the pick and roll, athletic, transition threat, both as a playmaker and as a play finisher. So I'm very high on Yegor. And to answer your question, why has he been rising up draft boards all of a sudden? Well, to be totally honest, I think that ultimately it boils down to people not having watched him enough before he came over to BYU, because I don't think that Demin is particularly showing anything that he hadn't already, at the very least, flashed before. So, yeah, love Yegor's game. I think he really fits the modern NBA, and I'm very high on him.
Dylan Harper and Nolan Traore. I saw a lot of people say that they're a little nervous about his explosiveness, Dylan Harper. Are you concerned about that? For Nolan, well, why the drop? I know the numbers have not been great, but it seems a little interesting to me that all of a sudden people are bailing on him so quickly.
Yeah. Oh, with Nolan, I think that what kind of causes skepticism now for some people is, he's still getting, those paint touches, and he's getting a lot of threes up, but the conversion just hasn't really been there. And obviously, last season he finished on a really strong note, but we were dealing with a pretty small sample size. He played in the French league as a pro for Saint-Quentin for a few games, for a handful of games, but this is really his first full season as a pro. The scouting report is out on him, so let's see how he adapts. I'm not out on Nolan at all. I'm still pretty high on him. I still have him in my top 5 for the next big board that I'll have out, but I do have some of those concerns as well. Now, for Dylan, I wouldn't say that concern is the right word for his athleticism for me, I guess. I would say that it's something that I'm watching because he is a below the rim finisher for the most part. And even just like with his first step and such, like he's not always going to blow past his defender. But with Dylan Harper, I like to compare him with someone who Nets fans will be familiar with. And even though he's not a Brooklyn guy, he is a New York guy, and that's Jalen Brunson. So I think with Dylan, that sort of big body kind of bully ball style that isn't always aesthetically pleasing, I guess, but it is functional and it's very effective, and it works in terms of getting paint touches and bullying smaller guys in the post even, or weaker guys, I guess you could say. That's kind of who I'm thinking about with Dylan.
Last one, Cooper Flagg, a super glue guy, or a superstar? What do you think?
For me, he's a superstar. I think that he already is a superstar at the high school and college levels. And so it's only a matter of time until he reaches the same status in the NBA. Do I understand some of the the comments about him being a glorified role player, or like you were kind of saying, a super glue guy? I can understand where they're coming from. I think that maybe compared to some, previous number one prospects, maybe the on-ball upside with Cooper is a little bit more unexplored. But I think that he's made tremendous leaps in that department over the last 2 seasons. I think that at Duke already as a freshman, as a 17-year-old freshman, I'll say, by the way, he's already getting on-ball reps. John Shire is letting him, get to his pull-up. I think that Flagg is showing that he can get to his pull-up. And yeah, the first few games at Duke, I think that he started off more strongly than he's ended games. He's had, some cramping issues at first. And then I think that versus Kentucky, I wasn't in love with how the Blue Devils as a whole executed down the stretch. I don't think that it would be fair to pin it on Flagg. But yeah, I mean, I'm super high on Cooper. He's my number one guy before the season. He's my number one guy right now. And I think that something drastic would honestly have to happen for him to not be my number one guy come draft time.
Who's a good player comp?
Jason Tatum, I think. Jason Tatum with less scoring. Or actually, I'll say this. Jason Tatum with less self-creation but more rim protection is my comp for Cooper Flagg.
All right. Let's get some plugs in for you. Where can they find you?
Yes, sir. Well, find me on Twitter at Wilko MCV. That's where I post most of my stuff on a day-to-day. Then all my draft stuff can be found on YouTube at Floor and Ceiling. I'm also on Blue Sky now. I know that a lot of people are moving off Twitter now to Blue Sky. So I'm on Blue Sky at Floor and Ceiling as well. But yeah, YouTube and Twitter, those are my main destinations at Wilko MCV at Floor and Ceiling.
All right. You can follow me at Netfans, on Twitter. You're watching this on YouTube right now. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a like and subscribe. Have a great day. Have a great night. And let's go Nets. We're out.